Hey everybody, I hope you guys are doing great. I'm very excited about this new series that we're going to be developing. It's going to be focused around Xamarin Forms, specifically Xamarin Android. So we're basically going to be creating an Android application. It's going to be very basic, so the logging in process, connecting a SQLite, and making maybe a directory. We'll see where it goes. I mean, I'm always open for feedback as to what people want to see as the series progresses. By the end of today's tutorial, we will be setting up from scratch our Xamarin project. We'll be connecting uh, my actual physical phone and be showing it on the screen. And basically, we'll have a login with a background and we'll get some feedback. Also, a little bit of formatting will go into play and maybe even some fallbacks that I found that had issues with during my learning process. So the final product will look like this. So you'll have a username, password, and a proceed button with a background when everything's put in. So for example, John 111, and we go to proceed. You'll get something along those lines. This is just to kind of get our feet wet as we progress through the project. And from here, it's not far-fetched to see how it would connect to SQL. Okay, so let's get started. The most important thing is let's get the Visual Studios launched. I'm using Visual Studios 2017 Community Edition. And let's start creating our new project. So we'll say File, New Project. We get here many options. If you don't have the cross-platform option, I do have a video that explains how to bring this into your system, and we'll go from there. So let's select cross-platform. We would use this one here. Let's name this something. Let's name it Xamarin app. Let's say OK. Here we have options like always for Visual Studios. We have the blank app and the master detail. For this app, at least at the beginning, we're just going to stick to the blank app just to keep it nice and simple. I use Xamarin Forms. Like I said, the advantage over the other ones is that I'm not just developing for one platform. Xamarin Forms has almost like a base project that trickles down to the iOS as well as the Android. And I'm also going to be using the portable class library. Let's click OK. So let's give it a couple of seconds or minutes in some cases for this to um, set the project up. Great, and we are done. It took a little while. I had to pause it there for a second, but hey, we're back with the magic of recording. So anyway, so here we're looking at the project. I'm just minimizing a few things. So here we have the portable, where a lot of your coding will actually be done here. This is the layer that I was talking about that kind of trickles downwards. And then here we have anything that's Android specific. You'll find that, for example, to be able to hit a lot of the functions that are native to Android, like the light flicking on and off, or dimming your screen, or that sort of thing, it would actually be handled here, and then you'd actually almost bubble up an event into the portable for you to actually be able to toggle it on or off, or do whatever you feel like doing. So that's just a very high level overview of that. Same thing happens here with the iOS. As you can see, and here we have the Windows if you're developing for a mobile Windows type of setup. We really won't be looking at these two, to be honest. We might touch them a little bit, but realistically, I'm not really focusing on that. I'm focusing more on the Android part of it. So here in our main, let's call this the main layer, the portable layer. we have a few things that are interesting to, well, mainly one thing that's interesting to us, at least for this part of the project, and it's this part here. So this, it's very much XML, uh, which if you know WPF and a few other languages, this might look very familiar. The nodes themselves might be named differently, but this is what you're looking at. Before we run the project for the first time, I actually want to show a few things. So let's say um, we're developing, for example, right now the phone that I have connected to here. It's a Galaxy S3, which I believe has Jelly Bean 4.1.2. These numbers actually become very important because you want to develop for the lowest um, piece of hardware that you want to run on. Otherwise, it won't run. So let me show you what I'm referring to. So let's go to here to our Android layer. We'll go to properties, and under Android manifest, right here I have the minimum setup for 4.0.3. But if I was to set this up with, let's say, Oreo, oh, and by the way, I like running on physical devices. So right now, what I'm doing is actually casting from my S3 um, using a program called MobiZen. Great program. It's actually free. I've used it quite a few times. So if we try to run this, actually, let's save it. Let's go back to our portable layer. And for whatever reason, it's not actually seeing my Android device. Let's connect it again. Let's see if that gets it going. Actually, I believe I know why. There you go. You learn something new every day. It's actually because as you can see, I just want you to focus here. See, if I try to run this application on the S3, you don't get the actual phone. You don't see it. So if we go to here, the ice cream, you're able to see it. So right now, if we run it, let's give it a little bit of time. Oh, let me just reconnect this here. Give it some time for the phone to become visible. Oh yeah, and when you run the application for the first time, it will actually just automatically launch if everything compiled properly. The first time I find that it actually takes a little bit longer for it to compile, so just keep that in mind as well. I find that actually the Android emulators are extremely slow, so I hate using them. So I prefer definitely using the hardware over the software. Uh, the hardware, I mean, I have a couple of old S3s, I have some S5, some S6. I basically just keep the phones as I go upgrading, mainly for development purposes. So we're just waiting here for it to do its magic. So you see the white screen, that's actually a splash screen. Later on I'll show you how to do something with this splash screen. And as you can see here, it's working. It's saying welcome to Xamarin Forms. So that's great. So we know that our project can compile successfully. So let's start doing some stuff. I'm just gonna leave that there. Let's stop the project here. So first thing, I'm going to grab this here. and I'm actually going to remove it. So if you see the code here, it's we actually had the label which was welcome to xamarin.forms. We are going to remove it here, remove it from here. A stack layout. So this part here is actually how things are going to be displayed. So here, basically, there's displayed from top to bottom, which is great for what we're trying to do, which we're basically going to have a top layer being the user name, the second layer or the second thing being displayed will be the password, and finally the third thing will be a button. So let's start with that. So to put in a text box in Xamarin, it's called entry. Entry, click that. We need to give it a name. So X, let's name it something. Let's call it, let's go old school, username. So I put txt username. So I'm actually able to, in the code behind, refer back to this control. Let's give it a placeholder. So a placeholder is something you see before you click on and start typing into it. So in this case, user name. And then in this case, we're going to finish off with a /, and that means that that control is complete. You could also do something like this if you want to set other properties in this area here. But in this case, we're not doing that. So let's do /. The next step would be, let's do the password. So same kind of scenario, entry, name, txt, password. Let's give it a placeholder, password. And let's give it the is password, true. We're giving it the is password because if we don't, then you can actually see the password itself. Let's save it. Always remember Control S is your best friend. Or you can just click the save here or here. This will save everything. This just saves the current page you're on. So let's save everything and let's just run it. Let's see what we got here. As you can see, it's actually compiling a lot quicker than the first time. And that's because we already ran it once. So that's one of the benefits that I see of using the hardware. And also, I mean, the great thing about using MobiZen is that you can actually type into it with your keyboard. So let's say John, and let's just test out the password and say test, test, see? And we get that cool asterisk function here. So great, that's looking great. So let's stop it. Now let's add a button. So open bracket, button. We have to give it a name. Name, button, submit. Now a button has text in it. So text, submit, and let's close it. Let's run it to see what it looks like. Let's get this opened up. And we got our submit. When we click this button at this point, nothing's happening. Nothing at all. So what do we need behind the button? We need an action, right? So let's stop it. And then click. Clicked is the action. Event handler. And that just kind of popped up and you selected it. So now we want to see the event itself to see what it's actually doing. So we're going to right click and say view code. You can also go here and say main page xml.css, which will bring you to the code. Let's save it. Sorry, I wanted to close that to show you something else. You can go here and click F12 as well. It'll bring you there. Or, like I was saying at the beginning, view code. So now that we're here, let's see, what can we do? Let's display an alert box when everything is. Let's just display an alert box. Display alert. That's the equivalent of a message box.show if you're coming from a C# background. Here it's giving you what you could do. Let's call it, let's give it a title, demo app. Let's give it a message. This is a test, and we want the button to be OK. So let's see if we've gotten a little bit further in our project. Any moment now, it should appear. Great. So let's click submit to see what happens. Click submit, demo app. This is a test. Okay. It's looking pretty good so far. Uh, let's uh, let's refer back to some of the controls we have in the actual GUI layer. So let's create a string. So a string is basically basically anything. It's just words. There could be numbers, decimal points. I'm assuming you might have a background in this as well already. So I don't want to go too far into detail into that. I could if people want me to. So let's call this variable message, MSG. And I'm going to use string.format. I'm using string.format because it's easier to inject variables into a string versus using the typical plus sign to concatenate the variable with a set of words. You'll see very quickly what I'm talking about. So let's say your user name is, and we do single quotes, 0, and your password is, single quotes, and 1. And then here we will refer back to our controls in the main area, which is txt username. We have the control and we want the property text, and txt password dot text. So now what this is doing is basically saying this is value 0 and this is value 1. So whatever's in this variable is going to get injected into here, and whatever's in this variable or controller in this case is going to get injected into here. I just find that it creates neater code that way. And we'll display that. Now let's run it. There we go. Let's just run through it quickly. John, 1, 2, 3, and submit. And there you have it. Your name is John and your password is 1, 2, 3. So we know we're accessing the values from the control. Um, this series in itself assumes that you have some level of programming already. So you know that you could grab these values and put them to variables and do a variety of things. So we're going to click OK. That's looking fairly good. Stop it. We're gonna save it again. It's always important to save. You never know when your computer could crash or something could go wrong. So now that we're here, we're actually going to create the, let's see, let's see what the sample looks like. So we're gonna create this portion here, the like it's a frame around it. We're also gonna push it down to the middle, and we'll go from there. So we have a stack. Before the stack, we're gonna create the frame. Oops. Just frame. Okay. Background color. We're gonna give it a background color, maybe let's say aqua. We can actually make the corners around the frame more round. So radius, corner radius. Give it a radius of 10. We can always adjust that. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, wow, covered the whole thing. And that is partially due because of where the uh, the frame is itself. So let's stop it. So remember when I mentioned that the stack frame kind of displays everything in order. So right now by putting, sorry, the stack layout displays everything in order like a stack, one on top of the other. So this is on top of this, is on top of that. So the frame itself is kind of occupying everything right now, like the whole area. We kind of don't really want that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another stack layout. We're going to grab this and sandwich our stack frame, or our frame, sorry, not our stack frame. And we'll see how that goes. As you can see now, it's more controlled. It's not all over the place, right? Which is what we wanted. So let's minimize this. Let's stop it, and we're gonna grab here, and we're gonna play with another property of the stack layout called the vertical option. Vertical option. You also have a horizontal option. So we want the center. So we wanted basically the vertical axis right in the center. Well, we're saving that. We're running it. And great, now we have it in the center. This is looking great. It's almost at the point that we have our display that we had previously. So now it's the background, right? So how are we going to change the background? So let's stop this again. Uh, so over here, under the content page, we can actually add a property. Actually, before we do that, let's uh, let's bring in the image. Let's bring in our image. So I've already pre-allocated some images. I just basically grabbed them off the net. So to put in images, we actually want them in the resources of Android and iOS. So we're going to open up Android. We're going to go to resources. We're going to go to drawable. And let's see, where is our images? We're going to grab this and we're just going to throw it in here. give it a little bit for it to load up. Okay, it's there. We're going to make sure it's Android resource, and we're going to uh, copy, copy always, and we're going to make a copy of this as such. We're going to go down to iOS. We're going to go to resources, and we're going to paste it in here as well. Same thing, copy always. And then over here, this is the name of the image. I honestly prefer to kind of open it and then copy that name. So you can highlight it, right click, copy, just to make sure. It's very common for spelling mistakes, capitals and whatnot to happen. And then you end up spending a lot of time trying to figure out what's wrong. So anyway, so under the content page here, we can actually access a property called background image. And here we'll paste that background image, the address to it. So double quotes and then that that name. So let's run it and see what happens. And there you go. We have a completed login page. Mind you, it's not connected to SQL. And I mean, there's areas for improvement. Submit. Still working. Great. So in the next series, we're going to be expanding on this. We're going to do a little bit of validation on this, and we'll be connecting to a SQLite database where we will be basically checking for these values and going from there. So if you'd like, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, hey, I'm always interested in improving this and seeing what everybody's interested in learning and areas that I can improve myself in showing you. So if you have any questions, please comment below and love to hear from you guys. Talk to you later.